Up next, Authentically Detroit sits down with Jackson Koeppel to discuss what's been on everybody's mind lately, DTE. This week's hot takes from Bridge Detroit. Detroit names new sustainability director. Will he have enough support? And DTE faces looming storm on its political spending amid outage outrage. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the Neighborhood Tech Hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show.
Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from WDET Studios in Midtown Detroit. We are a content partner to bridgedetroit.com. I'm Donna Givens-Davidson. Thank you for listening and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. Unfortunately, Orlando won't be joining us today as he and his family bury a beloved aunt. I authentically miss him co-hosting with me, but I am still excited about this episode. We've been trying to get today's guest on the show for months, and finally the stars have aligned. Today we have founder and executive director of Souladarity, Jackson Koeppel. Jackson, how is this day finding you?
This day's finding me pretty good. Glad to be here.
Oh, so glad to have you. So, whenever there's inclement weather, you wonder how hard and how strong the rain's going to be and whether this is going to be another day of unpredictable outages when DTE finds the challenge of keeping power going during bad weather.
Yep. Every time it rains, I got to list 5 or 6 people in the corner of Highland Park that loses power every time the wind blows too hard. And I start calling the list as soon as I see on the outage map that same spot has lost power again. Mm-hmm. So every time it's like, all right, might need to drop everything I'm doing and start doing community support.
Right. It's the rain. It's the wind. We can't really anticipate those things in a city like Detroit with rain and wind happening only once every 500 years.
It's not like the weather keeps getting worse because of climate change or anything. That would be crazy.
All right, it's time for Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. So we have a couple today. One, Detroit names new sustainability director. Will he have enough support? And this is by Jenna Brooker in Bridge Detroit. Last week, Mayor Mike Duggan announced the appointment of Jack Akinlosutu as the city's new director of the Office of Sustainability. And we've been waiting for this for some time. But anyway, the office was created in 2017 to guide the city's work to create healthy, green, vibrant, accessible neighborhoods where all Detroiters can contribute and benefit, including initiatives like transitioning to clean energy and transforming the city's fleet of cars to electric vehicles. Akinlosutu comes from Washington, D.C. with a decade of experience in cities across the United States doing climate change work in the public and private spheres. Holding past positions at the D.C. Department of Energy and Environment and the New York Mayor's Office of Sustainability under Mayor Bill de Blasio. But during a budget hearing for the mayor's office, When this appointment was discussed, Councilmember Scott Benson raised concerns about a lack of funding and staff support for Akinlo Sutu and how the city's Office of Sustainability is structured. He said, "We want to make sure that we're going to fund this properly and ensure that the new director has the support that they need," adding that he doesn't want the job to be seen or to become the punishment of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is a Greek mythology character who was made to roll a boulder uphill for eternity, and every time he was near the top of the hill, the boulder rolled back down. Now, I have to be honest, some of us who work in community development and social justice issues kind of feel like Sisyphus sometimes, don't we?
That's a familiar feeling, absolutely.
So what do you think? Do you think that this is great news that the city has appointed a sustainability director, or do you share the concerns that this is not going to be properly supported?
I mean, if I'm looking at the way it was probably under-adequately supported in the past, I probably share the concern. I think it's the case in a lot of cities that a sustainability department is it's an afterthought, or it's a thing that you're doing to get the accolades of having a sustainability department, but you're not actually able to move forward, right, on those really transformative projects. I can't say for sure if this idea of like they've got staff in all the departments and all this like really makes sense, but I do know that I feel like some good plans came out of the department in the past, and I didn't necessarily see how all that was transforming into actual projects in the neighborhoods actually benefiting the majority population of Detroit. So I'm always optimistic because I've got to have some optimism, but at this point, I share the skepticism about if this administration is really going to support the sustainability office to operationalize this stuff and not just come out with pretty plans.
Yeah, we loved Joel Harani Harris at Eastside Community Network. We honored him at last year's Eastside Extravaganza, and we were devastated to learn that he was leaving for a private sector position, but we weren't surprised. During the expansion of Stellantis, he was not at the table. He was nowhere trying to make sure that the sustainability agenda was translated into the community benefits agreements that were discussed. Even as we talk about some of these energy issues, there's no way his voice was being heard by people who were speaking on behalf of the city or being heard as a spokesperson for the city. And so I think there's so many issues. One of them is just that sustainability is huge. And the other one is that if at one point he had private sector funding for at least some staff people.
Yep.
And then his office was integrated into the Department of General Services.
Yeah, it always seems to me, right, that people are trying to say we're going to have this sustainability plan, but we're not going to address a development model that is super extractive or dumps most of the pollution costs onto poor Black and brown communities, right? Like, I think that a lot of cities do it as a separate thing, but don't actually integrate it into, all right, how should this affect the way we think about new industrial development, right?
Yeah, but I think that a lot of cities do better also.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah.
Some cities have full offices with staff who are equipped and empowered to do work. And so I don't want to just assume that reporting to Trish Steinberg, who is in the newly created Office of Strategy, Chief Strategy Officer, and they say, well, he's in the mayor's office, but I'm not certain that means he has influence over the mayor's behavior or the mayor's decision making. I think it's separate from that.
Yeah.
There are people who are not in the mayor's office who have influence. My question is not where is this position located, but is it empowered within the city, and does it have staffing within the city? And then my other question is, he seems like a really nice guy, and he certainly talked about some of the issues that we all care about in some of the interviews, but does he have experience working with grassroots groups and really allowing some of the issues to, rise from the grassroots as opposed to responding to a predetermined agenda? He kind of comes here by way of Bloomberg. And I believe Bloomberg is funding this position. Mm-hmm. And so anytime Bloomberg is in charge, I want to see the, fine print. And I don't want to prejudge him because he could be a great person. And I want to welcome him to the city. I want to thank the mayor for moving forward with this appointment and just try to have an open mind. with a little bit of skepticism, because anytime I find myself completely agreeing with something that Scott Benson has said, I'm always wondering what happened here. No offense, Scott Benson, but we're not always on the same side of issues. We were on different sides when it came to the community benefits ordinance and on so many issues. But in this one issue, I have to say I agree with everything he said. And once again, that's not usual. And so I don't want to, look a gift horse in the mouth I just kick a gift horse in the mouth. But I do want to acknowledge that this is an interesting position.
Yeah. I mean, I think I very much feel the same way. Like, there's a lot of folks who will say a thing that I fully agree with, even if, great example of that, the guy Gary Glenn, hard right Republican on the west side of Michigan, who got ran out of office by the utilities because he hated the utilities. I disagreed with that man on every single thing except that.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I really make my protest about policies, not people.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
If we can agree on a policy, we can be friends when it comes to that policy. None of this is personal. It is not my personal disdain for the person who is Scott Benson or the person who is Mayor Duggan or even some of the other people who have not necessarily fought on our behalf. Yeah. It is my disdain for the policies that sometimes they embrace and also the language they use to sometimes disguise or to omit some of the things that we know we're dealing with on the ground level.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that level, as we talk about politics, there's another article I want to talk about, and that is DTE faces a looming storm on its political spending amid outrage. So this is by Craig Maurer in the Detroit News. No, I don't always read the Detroit News, but I do subscribe to all of the newspapers locally because I want to know everything about what's going on. Anyway, so the DTE spent at least $30 million over the last decade to influence the public and policymakers. Trevor Lauer, president of DTE Electric, has apologized for the outages and told lawmakers that accelerating investment in the microgrid amid a changing climate would be key to limiting future problems. I think that's a great idea. In fact, I think that instead of spending $700 million on shareholders, that $700 million would be better spent upgrading the grid. What say you, Jackson?
I say they've had 100 years to make guaranteed money.
But I'm just talking about last year. Just in the last year, if you spent $700 million last year, you certainly knew we had bad weather then and that the climate was changing then. Why didn't we spend it then? Why can we only spend money after a rate increase and then go ahead and pay shareholders hundreds of millions of dollars based on performance which has not been necessarily stellar?
Because there's no connection between how well they do and, like, they can be doing the worst performance in the world and their job is still make as much money for their shareholders as possible. And I'm not making a moral, like you said about people, I'm not making a moral judgment on any person working at DTE. They're a publicly traded company. Their legal job is to make as much money for their shareholders as possible. And it's wild to me that legislators haven't picked up on the fact that all this sort of like, we're great partners and we're going to work together in all this. They're a publicly traded company. They're trying to make money.
They are a publicly traded company that has also been granted a monopoly on supplying power. And so do those things make sense to you, publicly traded and monopoly? No. Publicly traded monopoly?
It's this thing where, and this is where you get this funny thing where like folks on the far right who hate the utilities for this reason, right? Is like they want their cake and eat it too. They want to act like a private company that gets to pursue profit, but they also want to make sure the state is protecting their right to be the only ones doing it, right? And all this money they're spending on, it's both the money they did in political contributions and all the dark money PACs and stuff, right? They're cutting back against community solar legislation, against net energy metering. They're fighting everything they can at the commission to keep the value of solar down. So they're saying, we're going to charge you more every year for our unreliable service, and we're going to undercut any ability for you to choose anything different, so we are your only option. Now, and by the by, we're going to keep giving all this money to our shareholders year over year.
Yeah, so one of the things I was reading, I have students who study this. I teach at Columbia University, and so every year my students have to do a project. And last year, one of my students did a project on microgrids. And these are students at Columbia University, not from Detroit. And they were doing an analysis comparing Michigan's utilities to utilities in our neighboring states of Ohio and Indiana. You know, those hotbeds of liberalism where corporations are held super accountable. And we found out that DTE was actually, and Consumers Energy are actually underperforming these places. We have less invested in renewable energy. Yep. We are using more polluting energy sources. We are less reliable and more expensive. How do you explain that?
So, one thing I'll say, and this is kind of unique to DTE, they recently spun this off, but they used to own pipelines that pump natural gas from Ohio to here, right? So DTE has a bunch of subsidiary companies that own coal trains, that owned and invested in these gas pipelines. So why didn't they switch to clean energy as fast as they otherwise could? Well, they had a big interest in keeping the gas lines flowing and keeping the demand high.
Yeah.
So,
I just wonder about the regulation, how our regulation could be so weak that we're losing to Ohio. I don't like to lose anything to Ohio. I mean, this is a state that stops using the letter M when Michigan and Ohio State play. It's so ignorant, and yet we're losing to them. Sorry, Ohio State fans, but this is how I feel about you. There's people who say the best thing about Ohio State is Cedar Point, but evidently also, there's some things we need to learn about energy regulation there.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Ohio's not always the best example. They've been having all this corruption stuff with utility officials literally bribing legislators for handouts for their old failing nuclear plants.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yes, and at the same time, there's ways that they may be outperforming. I'd love to see a comparison between all of these bad states and see who's doing the worst job. It's like a race to the bottom. But in Michigan, you don't necessarily have to bribe. Like in this article we're talking about, it's been reported that 8 of 14 committee members who participated in a hearing on March 23rd received at least $9,000 from each of DTE's political action committees over their careers.
Yep.
And in last year, apparently there was one of the former members of the State House said that there was a proposal to expand homeowner solar. And everybody signed on. And then with hours of this proposal going public, many of them withdrew their names and the proposal died in committee. So, this is a direct, specific action that this, I believe, Ann Arbor legislator points out happened in the recent past. And we know that right now, of 148 current members of the Michigan House and Senate, 61% have received campaign money from DTE's Political Action Committee or one of its board members. And the 4 top lawmakers in the legislature have gotten at least $10,000. DTE and its board members and accounts tied to the company have given at least $777,000 to benefit Governor Gretchen Whitmer over the last decade.
Yep.
And then there is Michigan Energy First, a nonprofit that has DTE executives on its board and reported spending more than $4 million from 2018 through 2021, giving very generously to the Democratic Party, to Governor Whitmer, and even to disgraced House Speaker Lee Chatfield's nonprofit Peninsula Fund in 2019. So when you look at this pattern of giving, and again, I'm not talking about the people. My uncle was the first Black engineer at DTE. My cousin was a lobbyist for DTE. And so my people, DTE felt like family growing up, okay? Detroit Edison. This is not about DTE per se. This is about the process of or ownership of a monopoly and use of power and how democracy works or doesn't work.
I think that we shouldn't be surprised that this is the situation, right? We gave a company whose legal obligation is to make as much money as they can for their shareholders, right? The ability to take all of our money and figure out how are we going to make the most money with it, right? And for them, it's cheaper to buy political allegiance than it is to invest in improving their performance.
Well, that's true of all companies, and we can see how financialization is destroying our globe. That's a whole nother series of
Whole nother conversation, right? We'd be here another 2 hours.
We could talk about water in California. We could talk about international farming, and we can acknowledge the fact that financialization, that just giving money companies a blank check and the ability to exercise power without conditions is a really bad thing. That if power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And right now, corporations have absolute power over international economic systems.
Yep.
Now, Republicans or people on the far right blame the far left, and people on the far left blame the far right. But the reality is most of the people on either spectrum are not part of that 1% that's benefiting. And so I don't blame the corporations as much as I blame the people that we elect for accepting money. Now, you can accept money and still vote your conscience. You may not get it again.
Oh, exactly.
But you can accept money and still vote your conscience. One thing does not beget the other. But what I think is that it's our government's responsibility to protect us from other people. Like our government has to protect me from people who may want to take my car or who may want to take any of my assets, because we understand that human nature is not always, equitable in sharing. The idea that corporate nature is more inherently moral than human nature is some strange Chicago economist belief system. Milt Friedman put this thing out that, capitalism and money is purifying. Speaking of a strange God, the God of money is absolutely ridiculous, and that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to it very clearly with the, it is the legislator's responsibility, right? DT is going to keep trying to make money until we create the legislation and the structures of accountability that force them to deliver on their promises of outcomes. And if they don't, they eat the cost, right? It shouldn't be us throwing out fridges full of food.
Well, I run a nonprofit. If I mess up, guess who's not getting any more grants, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, just imagine if I was able to just say, well, I messed up, now give me more money because I messed up. Now I have to clean up what I messed up and I need more money from you so I can clean that up. That would never happen. It's the power of power. And I think that it's important for us to stop and look at that, though, because I think that here's another Milt Friedman favorite of mine, that it's that the corporation's ultimate responsibility is to maximize their return to stockholders. DTE is doing what corporations do. Now, why would we give a corporation a monopoly when this is what they're supposed to do, is to maximize profit, not to maximize performance? But you're seeing it happen again in so many sectors of our society. But we're here to talk to you today.
Well, and this is where I think you see the problem with monopoly. I've been doing, in my time as executive director for Souladarity, and still now, right, in support, I've been doing expert testimony at the Public Service Commission for over 5 years now, right? We've been filing, doing strong arguments.
Okay. Yeah. So Jackson, I want to hear more about that, but we have to take a break. I got into this conversation. I have to play Orlando's role today. We're going to go to a break and come back, and I want to hear more about what you've been doing.
Looking forward.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the neighborhood tech hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
All right, so welcome back. We are here once again with Jackson Koeppel. Super excited to have him here. Before you go into your biography, I want to read what you wrote about yourself because it's interesting. You're Soulidarity's executive director. Are you still the executive director?
I was. We transitioned leadership to Shmika Nichols in 2021.
Okay. So now you're just a free spirit, just fighting, an advocate. Anyway, you grew up in Manhattan. You went to college in Oberlin, Ohio, and you woke up in West Virginia, so I want to hear about that. You've been working on environmental justice issues since seeing the impacts of mountaintop coal mining in West Virginia and hydraulic fracturing for natural gas in Ohio. You believe that we need concrete alternatives to the fossil fuel economy that work for communities, and that the communities most negatively impacted are going to lead the creation of these alternatives. In addition to your work with Souladarity, you are a Wayne State student. Are you still a student?
Still, I haven't taken a class in several years because I've been full-time working, but I'm trying to get back to it.
So you are just self-taught, though. You're continuing to teach yourself, right? Yeah. And you're a member of Resource Generation and an avid collector of Hawaiian shirts. All right. So tell me about this waking up experience in West Virginia before we talk about Highland Park.
Yeah, I think that was really, I went down there for a 5-day march, trying to prevent the strip mining of a mountain called Blair Mountain that was the site of one of the largest armed labor uprisings in U.S. history. So these 200 miners were like, we are not taking the deal. The U.S. military was called in on them, and they fought a literal battle on the slopes of this mountain, which has a very it's an important part of labor history, right? This wildcat strike. And this mountain was on tap to be strip mined. And so a huge march was organized to bring a bunch of people from all around the country to walk the 5-day route that these miners took to sort of protest the strip mining of this mountain. I think in those 5 days, I've never quite experienced the feeling of being under threat of violence consistently in that sort of intensive a manner. And just the feeling of being in a place where it's it's not a subtle thing. The coal companies fully run everything here. And had conversations with coal truck drivers and folks while I was down there who were just yeah, we know it's bad. I have no other options. It's the coal economy or nothing. Even when people know the coal economy is actively killing them. And I think that was an understanding of the way the world works for real that I hadn't quite experienced yet, and a sense of we need a different way of meeting our needs because this is unacceptable. I didn't know what I was going to do with that for many more years, but landing here definitely gave me some direction.
I frequently speak of, in my class, I talk about sacrifice zones, right?
Yep.
And I always use coal mining communities as examples of sacrifice zones. The interesting thing about West Virginia is, for the most part, it is a place that is considered a white community, right? And usually in sacrifice zones, you have black or brown people, you have Native Americans on places that are plantations, and you have everything that's happening with the Navajo Nation, which is disgusting, or you have urban communities like the one you're in. But in West Virginia, you have people who are racialized also, even though we don't call them that. We call them hillbillies or rednecks.
Yep.
And we dehumanize them in that way, and it kind of allows for things. But then you also have this reification of the hillbilly, who wants coal and wants this coal economy to be put back to work. Like the coal economy has not killed them and destroyed their families and destroyed their communities and made it unlivable. And it's these narratives play out in our minds. And so did you find that to be true, that people are just have this nostalgia for this great past when they weren't dying of black lung disease?
I mean, so I think that, the most interesting thing I could share, a friend of mine in West Virginia actually told me the real origin of the term redneck. And he actually said one of the stories about its origin is that it originated at the Battle of Blair Mountain because the striking miners tied red bandanas around their necks so they could identify themselves, right? In battle smoke. And so I think like that's just one interesting way of being like, yeah, like the way that has been, that trope of people, right, has been like built up. And I'm like, who's going to blame someone for wanting to protect the job that's keeping them alive, right? And I think like there's a lot to be said for like I think that trope has been like played out in this way that makes people seem like idiots instead of being like, no, people are dealing with what's in front of them.
Right.
And unless we get to the place where it's like we have a different way and we have like a pathway to an energy system that doesn't rely on coal and we have a pathway to a new and different economy for those folks, like folks are going to do what they have to survive.
I mean, people, maybe perhaps coal miners are addicted to coal like a crack dealer is addicted to crack. It's a survival thing. It's not a good thing. It's not like they woke up and say, you know what? My dream is I'm going to sell crack, which may cause me, all kinds of harm. It is, these are my options, and you're taking away my options, and I don't have a sense of other options in a community that's been so desolated that you just look at it and it's like, oh my goodness, this is, also a place in the world where the whole opioid epidemic was really, expanded and people were prescribing all of these drugs and there were no protections for the human beings living within there. And so it gets politicized, it gets used as a means of trying to maintain control, but it's rarely looked at in the kind of compassionate way that we need to look at the way that corporatization and financialization is literally destroying lives. And you talked about feudalism and about the fact that government was not really working, right? And people didn't have rights. And you were like, let me go find another place where the government has fallen apart and people don't have rights. Aha, Highland Park, Michigan. Tell me about that transition.
I was supposed to be here for 3 months. I was in school, and after some of the experiences in West Virginia and around campus in Ohio, the idea of still being in school, learning about things without doing them was making it impossible to be there. And I was supposed to take a year off and come to Highland Park for a few months in a summer, learn a little bit about the community, learn a little bit about solar, and then go back to school, right? That did not pan out. I think the experience I had was kind of just having this kind of second wake up of like, oh, this is what the brutality looks like where the resources are extracted. And this is what the brutality looks like in the place where the dollars are being bled out of communities to pay for all this.
So you're kind of like Bill Gates. You dropped out of college to get rich, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was the move. Yeah.
That was the move. So let's talk about the issues that you found. Okay, so affordability. When I met you, I was introduced to you by one of my colleagues who was trying to wake all of us up in the community development industry to talk about sort of the racism that takes place in terms of the energy grid. So can you talk about some of the issues that you've been advocating for in your work in Highland Park?
So I think at the commission and through like doing the work with Souladarity, I think there's been like 3 crises, right? 3 crises that are all together that I've been working on over these years. First is the affordability crisis. Last we looked, there's about a $600 to $800 million affordability gap. That's how much people are paying more than they can afford, right? So power is extremely unaffordable. We have an infrastructure and reliability crisis because we have some of the worst reliability performance, and it's impacting people with very little means to actually absorb the harms of that, right? And we have a crisis of access to technology, right? Communities that are most harmed by those first 2 crises have a lot of barriers to getting solar, have a lot of barriers to getting microgrids, batteries, all that stuff. And these 3 crises are kind of compounding, right, to put communities in increasingly desperate and damaged positions. And so I think that I would say that those are kind of like the 3 things that have been kind of like focal points for me. And that has been both, trying to work on it at the very local level, getting Highland Park into the Communities LEAP program, working with a bunch of community stakeholders to do that, do as much local energy planning and local policy as we can. A lot of targeting the Michigan Public Service Commission. Every time DT files a rate case in the last few years, we've been in it. dealing with a bunch of the other kind of proceedings that happen at the commission, but increasingly starting to focus on like legislatively. The commission is a creature of legislature, and if we want solutions that address all three of those crises, we need the legislature to be passing smart and hard-nosed policy that's actually going to create those outcomes in our communities.
Absolutely. So, when you came to speak to us, you didn't actually necessarily start with that, though. You started by explaining things to us that were kind of concerning because we were excited about building back better and the infrastructure bill, and you let us know there's limitations to how well our community is going to be able to benefit or even absorb some of these new investments. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think, right, the infrastructure, right, is still owned by DTE, right? So funding for the things that would improve reliability, like the distribution grid, right, the wires that actually go from the substations to our homes, that's all DTE owned. So all this money that's coming down for electric grid infrastructure, it's going to be real hard for communities to capture that unless you can use it to build microgrids and things like that. And there are some options there. But I think the utilities are best positioned to actually capture those dollars. And so if they capture those dollars, that's going to have an effect on our rates. So I think there's one piece there. It's a real issue. And then there's a lot of different grant programs that are coming out, right, through Justice 40. But there have been some analyses coming out from Just Solutions Collective and other folks that watch this stuff federally that say, actually, you're not hitting the Justice 40 standards. The structure of this program is not going to get to 40% benefits in disadvantaged communities. And even for the stuff that is targeted to us, right, it takes a lot to write, manage, and handle a federal grant, right? And so who are these dollars going to go to? Probably not the organizations in communities, right? Unless, right, there is intentional work to level that playing field and make sure that communities are positioned to actually receive and build off these dollars. And the other piece, for going back to Michigan legislation, is that let's say communities want to build a solar project. We're like, we want to build community solar. We want to serve our houses with this affordable kind of energy, use a grant to build a solar project. It's going to provide power to folks for a lot of years. Well, we still don't have community solar legislation, so you can't transfer that power across the wires to the household that wants to subscribe to it, unless DT lets you. And they're only going to let you if they're going to charge you an arm and a leg to pass the power along their infrastructure, right? And so I think that there's policy issues at the state level that need to be addressed if we're going to use this money to meaningfully benefit community members.
So, I kind of knew that part, some of it, right? Yeah. Here's the part I didn't get. That our grid is so old. How old is it? Our grid is so old that that's got to contribute to these outages and why they last so long, but also that it doesn't have the capacity for a whole lot more new energy sources. Is that correct?
Yes. So we have, and listen, I'm gonna get a little wonky. I'm gonna ask you to dial me back. Some of us in Detroit and in a few other patches of service territory with DTE, we have this older, lower voltage grid. That grid, everything is older on it. All the wires, all the transformers, a bunch of different elements of it are just way older than the rest of the grid. And that means, right, the simplest metaphor is, if voltage represents like how big the pipe is that the water or power is running through and how much can run through at a given time, we have a lot of problems with an older, lower voltage grid being able to handle a lot of power all at once. So if you have a lot of solar in a neighborhood and suddenly all that solar, like a cloud passes over and then we get a big burst of sunlight and a lot of power floods back onto the grid, it might not be able to handle it. Right?
So that's for those of us who don't really understand how power works, that doesn't make any sense to me. Let me tell you what makes sense to me. I've got solar in my house, and now that I have all this solar energy, my house is using less DTE energy, so it's actually reducing the burden on DTE as opposed to increasing the electrical stuff on the house. So how does that work? Why wouldn't that actually help DTE for me to have another source?
So it does help DTE. Now, to be clear, they absolutely benefit from people meeting their own needs. What starts to come up is, let's, like, if you have solar on your house, I have solar on my house, few people on the block, no problem. Now, let's say suddenly we've got, every house has solar, right? Like, let's say we're up to 50% of the energy that a neighborhood needs is coming from the rooftops.
PTE loses profit, right?
Oh, they lose profit, first of all. But second of all, those wires are actually old, right? Those wires actually don't necessarily know what to do if all of a sudden, right, it's a cloudy day, and then all of a sudden there's a burst of sunlight, and now there's a lot of power on those homes, and a lot of power is going back out onto the grid. That's why they keep talking about we need to do tree trimming, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But if they don't upgrade the grid, they are leaving certain communities unable to be part of the clean energy transition.
Right. Wow. So one more question.
Yeah.
If I had a battery backup in my home and that solar if that extra energy went into my battery, then that would not overwhelm the grid, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So we need to do solar plus batteries, right?
Yes.
Let's do more of that. I'm excited about that, and yet we need to take another break.
Absolutely.
When we come back, I want to talk to you about microgrids and other opportunities in this new energy economy.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
And we are back with Jackson Koeppel talking about my favorite new topic that I don't understand, microgrids. So I feel like I'm in class when I'm learning about these things. So, Professor, explain what a microgrid is and why you think that might be important.
Yeah, so a microgrid is basically a little section of the electric grid that is separated out from the rest of it. So, it's a little island that power can flow in and out of. Let's say you got a bunch of businesses, homes, they're all in one little grid together. They can have solar and storage. They can send power out to the big grid when they have extra, and they can draw power in from the grid whenever they need to. But they're able to shut off that connection and be an island unto themselves when needed.
Okay, so do you think that establishing more microgrids would help our community sustain some of these energy inefficiencies or energy blackouts on reliability?
Oh, absolutely. So I think microgrids kind of serve two purposes. One, they allow you to build grids and build stuff in a different way. Because like we know, DTE owns all the distribution, right? Mm-hmm. But there's nothing stopping you or other people from building your own little distribution system for a small area, say for a square block, right? There's a lack of legislation clearly outlining how one can do it. But one of the benefits is that you can bring dollars and resources in to really build solutions in a way that isn't as possible through DTE. Mm-hmm. The other benefit is that even if DT started today actually making smart investments in the distribution grid, it would still take a while to actually do all those improvements that they've been deferring and actually see those benefits to communities. So what microgrids can offer, especially in this period, is security and resilience for neighborhoods, right? let's say the power goes out to, to a whole section of the city. It's like, well, we know that there's a microgrid that has solar and storage. We know there's a place we can go to get warm. We know there's a place we can go to charge our phones. I think it's a critical part of preparation, because even if we improve all this infrastructure, climate change is getting worse, and microgrids offer us some resilience and security.
So is the old way of generating energy outdated? Does it make sense for us to start considering wholesale change, like communities being powered by microgrids and DTE having a new business model where they help facilitate access to those microgrids as opposed to selling us nuclear energy?
Listen, my pithy statement is my job is to make DT better or gone. If they can get better, great. If they can amend their business model, great. But if we've got to get them gone, then we'll get them gone. I think that I think that DT could change their business model. They could say, you know what, we're not going to keep trying to make money off of big power plant investments. Mm-hmm. We're going to now see ourselves as a manager of the grid, a facilitator of community solar projects, distributed energy, and we'll run some power plants, but we're not seeing that as our primary business anymore.
Right.
That's possible. I don't think it's likely.
Well, but I think about Blockbuster all of the time. And I think about the fact that, your old way of making money off of late fees, because nobody ever turns their videos in on time, gets supplanted by Netflix, which is like, I was like the first Netflix subscriber in this metro area. I subscribed to Netflix. It made automatic sense to me.
That's a good metaphor for the solar move, yeah.
Right? And so I just look at it like either you can help facilitate this or it's just going to facilitate you out of business, because the reality is once people learn how to develop their own energy infrastructure, they don't need you anymore. And I don't know that the state can stop you. And maybe the state can say, you know what, you're not allowed to generate your own energy, but I think that would be a whole lot less popular than hiding behind the MPSCs. What is it? The Michigan Public Service Commission.
MPSC. You got it.
Got those
you got it. You
right.
got the acronym.
Okay. So I think that this is one of those things where we might want to encourage change and believe that change is possible, that it is possible for us to live in a world where we acknowledge climate change. The other things, I know that you're really focused on electrical. Have you looked at any alternatives to heating?
Yeah. So the way it looks is we know that we need the whole gas system has to go. And that is a hard pill for people to swallow. People love their gas stoves. And honestly, I actually saw a number of folks on Facebook with these outages. A lot of people were like, no, I'm keeping my gas stove because that's my resilience when the power grid goes out. Right?
Gas stove or a fireplace. I need one of two.
Right. No, I have a wood stove at the house in Highland Park, and that's been great. If you're physically able and have that ability, right? That's not the case for everyone. So we do need to switch out to all electric for everything, right? Right now, they've been able to keep the price of gas kind of artificially cheap, right? So it doesn't look like a good financial move. But 3 years, 5 years from now, right, like having an electric heater is probably going to be better than having gas. And so the trick is right now, I think we need funding at the state level, at the federal level, that is effectively getting down to communities to help folks make that transition now. Because let's say if communities like the east side of Detroit and Highland Park can't make the transition now, what we're going to see is communities that can afford to and want to do so for climate reasons, like Ann Arbor and suburbs, they're all going to be switching over to electric, right? The gas system is going to have less and less people on it, less and less people paying into it, and we're going to be stuck with the worst outcomes.
Right. So I believe in electrification, right? And we want to electrify our boiler.
Yeah.
At Eastside Community Network, if you are in our listening audience, we want to electrify our boiler at Eastside Community Network. Nobody has been able to give us a quote on electrifying a boiler for a building of our size, and we have been at it for trying to do it for over a year. I think part of it is also having the technical capacity in this region to do it. And when you have that technical capacity to do it, doing it well.
100%.
So we struggle with that. I think that's
behind,
one of the areas where we just need to grow our capacity. We struggle with the whole issue of vision for change, but I think geothermal is even more exciting. I went to a building in
Geothermal's even better if you can build
2016,
it,
and it was a geothermal building. It was Zachary and Associates, right there in right by SIVA. There's a building right there. I think it's whatever it is. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a cool little apartment building, and they've got geothermal heating and cooling. They are using green stormwater infrastructure, and they have water harvesting they're using, and they're saying, hey, we have so much water that we need to figure out what to do with this water. Maybe we'll sell this water to irrigate community farms. I'm thinking this is the way it needs to work.
Yep.
In our communities, we have the opportunity to demonstrate best practices and to say, let's see how much it costs. Let's see how we can train people to be technically proficient at this.
Yep.
So that they can do it and make all the money on it, right? Because if nobody knows how to install that electric boiler, anybody who's listening who's looking for a new job or a business, learn how to do it and do it well so that you can service all of these people who need to electrify for boilers and hot water heaters. So I'm excited about the prospects.
But we need to build the account. Like, you're totally right. We in DT's 15-year plan, they're proposing a big switch to clean energy that they own and is big and central, of course.
Because it's always 15 years in the future where we have a problem.
But a big problem that we have is we're like, well, we want to see much faster rates of electrification. And even the experts that are working for us and with us are like, it's going to take years to build up the economic infrastructure, like to have the businesses, the trained people, all this stuff in our region, because DT's been so far behind on it and has an interest in slowing it down.
They do, but nothing stops us from learning. Nothing stops us from innovating. You dropped out. I mean, you're the new, what do I call you, Bill Gates? And so now you can get rich doing this. I
don't know how comfortable I am with that.
I'm just saying. But, you can help build that economy. I think a lot of times we think activism is literally just fighting. Sometimes activism has to be creating. And you did that in Highland Park, where you created the alternative to the DTE lighting, right?
Yeah, we're doing it piece by piece. We've put up about Soulidarity's put up, I should say Soularity, because now it's happening. Well, I'm not ED. 17 solar streetlights have gone up, and I'm very excited that now, with the help from Communities Leap and the Department of Energy, I think the city is actually really starting to explore can we do this at a citywide scale, which I'm very excited to see.
What I wanted to see more of us do is design microgrids, design projects where we are doing geothermal energy, continue doing our community farming, continue coming up with new water catchment and delivery systems. Yeah. Because I think in this world, the way that it's structured, it's going to take some while for government to catch up to the idea that equity and sustainability will also save our planet, not just our pocketbooks. Because right now, it's almost like we can get rich and keep on getting richer and richer. And, you used to watch those cartoons. Everybody of every age group was watching the cartoons where this evil person is like, ooh, I'm going to control the world. I'm going to control the world. And they're greedy. And then it's like, wait a minute, but they're going to destroy the world they want to control. And that's literally what's happening with our current structure is the people who are making the most money, inuring their future generations. They talk about generational wealth. And it's like in the next 200 generations, you all will be wealthy. But there won't be Earth unless we do something with that. And so you can't build generational wealth if there are no future generations. I have rephrased it and reframed it in my mind to generational well-being. And we have a responsibility to promote that. So I'm interested to see what's next for you and how you can take some of your energy and innovation to say, let's try and test out new things. If you want to build a microgrid, let's do it on the east side. I know you're a Highland Park guy, but the east side needs help too. And I really want a microgrid. It's like one of those things where people see a really nice purse. I just want a microgrid, not a purse, a microgrid. For Christmas.
I'd love to see it if and let's go back to the sustainability director, sustainability department. Wouldn't it be awesome if we had a sustainability department that was staffed and high capacity enough to where it could be like, oh, Eastside Detroit wants to do something, Highland Park wants to do something, let's get together 5 or 6 communities that want microgrids and actually go for one of these big federal grants that exists out there so we can hit that scale and have institutional support behind it.
Yeah, and that will happen too when residents hear about these things and start demanding that of our sustainability director,
right.
because we do elect our elected officials and they are accountable to us. And so I think that the more people know about things like this, the more people know about alternatives, the more excited they're going to get. So I think we're going to have to go, but I really want to thank you for finally coming on. I think this has been a fun conversation. I've learned a lot, and hopefully other people have. If others have topics that you would like discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. And now it's time for shout outs. So I'm going to start with you, Keith. Do you have anybody you'd like to shout out? Let's shout out,
I'll say this. I'll shout out because we're talking about microgrids. I'm going to shout out Juan Shannon at Parker Village, who's been working on a microgrid affordable housing vision for a super long time. So on that kind of like to that tune of people who have been grinding away to try and make something happen while the situation was not favorable to it. I'll shout him out. Shout out Shamika Nichols, new Executive Director of Souladarity. And longtime colleague and comrade. And I'm gonna go ahead and also just shout out Mark Templeton and a number of the staff people at the Abrams Environmental Law Clinic, who are all the way in Chicago, but have been repping Souladarity, We Want Green Too, and our friends, Urban Core Collective at the Public Service Commission, and making sure there's direct community representation at the commission for years and years and years, and not charging us a dime for it. And that's been super important. Those are my 3 shout outs.
That's
today.
awesome.
Yeah.
And today on this Political Monday, I'm going to shout out 2 politicians and 1 person who has worked in the public sphere. First, Scott Benson, shout out to you for highlighting the need for funding and support for an effective sustainability director. I absolutely agree with what you said. And I appreciate the fact that you put it out there, because I know that's what I've been saying publicly and privately to our previous sustainability director is you need more power and support. And then I'd like to shout out Mary Sheffield, Council President Mary Sheffield, for being the lone vote against the District of Detroit proposal to create yet another Outage empire. And she gave a pretty impassioned speech against it, explaining that there could have been concessions and the concessions just were not made. We allow ourselves to get backed up by being told we have to hurry up and do something because the politicians, if I was a politician, I wanted to get my way. I just wait until the last minute and ask you and then say, no, we need to hurry up because there's no time to figure this out. But, she did not respond to that level of urgency, and I appreciate her standing up. I think we could have gone further. I think we need to ask ourselves, do we need a downtown development authority? And I say we don't. Downtown, it was created to catalyze downtown, and the downtown has been catalyzed. But she went farther than anybody else who voted. So shout out to Mary Sheffield. And then finally, I want to shout out my friend Charity Dean for the opinion piece she put in the Detroit Free Press last week, the first step in closing Detroit's wealth gap, dare to say black. When did black become a bad word? When I was a kid, we were saying, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Now it's like, say it softly, black and people of color and every other minority, because if you say black, that makes you a racist or it makes you racial. And, we did not create race. Race was created by people who decided to enslave my ancestors. But if you're going to call me something and that becomes my ethnicity, I'm black and I'm proud. And Charity made me proud last week. So I want to thank Charity for having the courage to say something that is so politically unpopular in 2023 for some reason. And with that, I want to thank.
Can I tag one more
Absolutely.
on? I'm so sorry to do it,
That's
but
okay.
because you said it, I would hate myself if I didn't say it. I want to shout out Mayor Glenda McDonald of Highland Park for showing up and waiting for hours at the Senate hearing on DT's outage stuff to give testimony about the impact community-wide on Highland Park. It makes such a huge difference that local elected officials are willing to step up and do that, and it transformed that hearing. So I wanted to make that one last shout out.
I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes we have to shout out our politicians when we want them to do what we need them to do. So thank you so much for listening, and catch the wave.